right now, where they continue to brace for Hurricane Irene. Mayor Bloomberg at the microphone there.
Ongoing evacuation of residents of NYCHA facilities, and then we'll talk about some other issues. But I did want to first say all of the forecasts are basically the same. The storm is headed in this direction, slightly east, slightly west, slightly stronger, slightly weaker. But this is a storm where if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it can be fatal. There will be very high winds, no matter whether they're categorized as a tropical storm or a Category 1, 2, 3, 37 hurricane, whatever it is. There's a lot of blowing debris. Tree limbs come down, and water gets into places that can cause electrical shorts. It is dangerous out there, and the thing that makes the most sense for everybody is to first comply with the mandatory evacuation. It's done because you may be in danger, but as importantly, if, God forbid, you needed some emergency services, our first responders would have to put their lives in jeopardy to get to you and to provide the service. And we're worried that in some cases we just may not be able to get there. And you never know when you are going to need a doctor or something like that. So the storm continues on track. We don't have any other updates. Winds will pick up as you go through the afternoon. The reason that you have rain and then no rain, rain and then no rain is the way a hurricane works. There are these bands of rain that surround it, and when you're between them, you think there's no storm, and when you're under one of them, you get a lot of rain. But we're nowhere near yet the really heavy winds. Those will come in something about 9 o'clock tonight. And the place of the time when you're likely to have flood damage of just literally water all of a sudden pouring over the side of the bulkhead is something like 8 tomorrow morning. The winds are scheduled to subside late tomorrow afternoon, and then we're going to have a whole separate set of issues of how we clean up, and mass transit tries to get back, which probably is not going to happen until well into the day on Monday. So Monday morning is going to be a mess in terms of a commute. But our concern is saving lives. Our concern is making sure that the only thing that comes out of this is inconvenience and maybe a little bit of property damage. We don't need people to die. Unfortunately, I was told about somebody who fell off a ladder earlier when they were trying to board up their house. They haven't died yet, but seriously injured and may, in fact, be fatal. Now, things happen all the time, but we can take some steps and to try to minimize the damage and prevent as many as we can. We also are going to talk a little bit about power and the possibility of electricity being shut off in some areas. Kevin Burke from Con Ed is going to help us with that. But remember, we're asking buildings to shut off their elevators, certainly doing that in NYCHA. We just don't need people stuck in elevators. And if the power goes out while you're in the elevator, we're going to have to not find out about it, which sometimes it's hard to do, and then get the fire department there. And the fire department should be standing by for real emergencies. And so if you haven't evacuated yet, you still have time to do it. There is no mass transit available, but we have buses at NYCHA facilities. You can hail a cop car. Some of the taxis are working. Maybe some friendly motorists will give you a ride, or you can just walk. But just because you say, I'm living on the 10th floor and water's not going to get here, that's true. But that doesn't mean we could get to you or you could get out if you had to. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be flying glass. From the higher you go up, the stronger the winds are. We should heed the warnings and follow what the law says. Please evacuate the A areas, the low-lying areas, and all of the Rockaways. As a programming note, when we finish talking about what's happening here, we will have a press conference in Spanish and take some questions for our Spanish-speaking audience. Margarita Lopez, a NYCHA board member who used to represent the Lower East Side on the City Council and has been out in the field encouraging the residents to evacuate, will conduct that. Let's first talk about NYCHA. If you're a resident of a NYCHA facility in the Rockaways, Coney Island, the Lower East Side, or any other of the low-lying Zone A areas, you must evacuate now. It is a mandatory evacuation. Your buildings are shutting down. Your elevators are shutting down. Your boilers are shutting down, and it will be much too dangerous to stay. Now, for the last 5 hours, we have been running bus service from NYCHA developments to nearby evacuation centers, And we hope NYCHA residents and other New Yorkers who need to evacuate have places to stay with family or friends who live in safe areas. But in case you do not have family or friends close by, we have evacuation centers fully staffed and ready to go. There are about 78 hurricane shelters and 8 special medical centers across the city. There is plenty of room. No one's going to be turned away. If NYCHA residents don't want to use one of our free buses to evacuate, which we have outside the NYCHA facilities that need to be evacuated, you could use a private car or a cab. Our GPS data does show us that the number of taxis on the streets right now is just below the average for a Saturday afternoon, and we have moved to a zone fare system to encourage ride sharing and increase the capacity of each cab. We've also directed cabs to go to the evacuation areas. Liveries and commuter vans have also been authorized to pick up street hails anywheres in the city. But the essential point is, even if you have to walk, evacuate now. And as I said, this is for all of the Zone A areas, the low-lying areas, but also the Rockaways, even for the areas that are higher up. Because there, if you were to, God forbid, have a medical emergency, for example, it's not clear that we could get to you. As the winds build up, the bridges may very well close down. It may not be possible to get off Staten Island or to get off the Rockaways. And so it's a good time right now to say, okay, better to be safe than sorry. We've been saying this all day. The time is running out. It's going to get dark in a little while, and the rains will start getting heavier, and winds will make it very difficult and dangerous to be outside. The airports are basically all closed. The Staten Island Ferry is still running. It's running on a 1-hour schedule simply because there is no demand. Nobody's showing up at the ferry. We'll continue to do that into later in the day, but as soon as the winds start to build and it gets to be something like 40 knots, at that point we think it's not safe to run them, and so we will shut those down. The storm is coming, and the few things that are still working, the few stores that are still open, you would expect to all close in the very near future. Since this morning, we have seen a marked increase in the number of people evacuating. Most are getting the message, but for some reason, some people have yet to leave. So let me just one more time, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it is exactly what we are trying to do. If you haven't left, you should leave now. Not later this evening, not later this afternoon, but immediately. Let me repeat that briefly in Spanish. Por repito porque es vital. Si usted está en una de las zonas a evacuación y no se han ido, tiene que salir inmediatamente. No ponga su vida en peligroso es gente salir en este momento. The latest forecast has the epicenter of the hurricane hitting east of the 5 boroughs. Tropical storm winds of 40 miles an hour and higher will start about 9 o'clock tonight, continue to increase to hurricane strength through the morning. Most of the storm is going to take place during the night when you're asleep or when you get up early Sunday morning. And the most important thing to do is to stay inside. No beaches. It's just much too dangerous. No parks. Branches come down. We just don't need people getting killed. And there's so much flying debris, no matter how careful we are. Be sure that you stay inside in the morning. Look out the window. May be fun to say I walked around on a hurricane, but it wouldn't be fun if you have to say it from your hospital bed. If you live in a high-rise, especially on the 10th floor or above, stay away from the windows in case they break and shatter. If you have a yard or a porch or a balcony or any other space, make sure everything, including outdoor furniture, is tied down or secured properly. And you should know, as a preventive measure, because people have asked me as they've driven down the streets and they see what the sanitation department has done. Sanitation department has spent the day emptying all the litter baskets, turning them upside down so nothing goes into them, and placing them next to buildings to reduce the risk of them blowing around. We have reports of some people thinking they're helping by putting the baskets back on the corner. Please do not. If you see a litter basket next to a building, leave it there. Our sanitation department knows what they're doing. If you encounter an emergency, call 911. If it's not an emergency, please call 311 instead, so you can keep 911 open for the most urgent calls. And nyc.gov, I'm told, is working fine now, so you can use that as well. National Grid is fully prepared. There is a chance that Con Ed will be forced to shut down parts of its grid if there is severe flooding. So besides having a go bag, you should also be prepared for the possibility of losing power in your home. And that means considering filling your sinks and bathtubs with potable water, particularly if you live in an upper floor of an apartment building. A lot of the water, it gets pumped up, and if the electricity's not there, the pumps don't work. So fill a bathtub or fill some sinks with water. Make sure you know where your flashlights are. It's a good time to take them out, put them on the kitchen counter or someplace where it's easy to get. Make sure that they work. If not, stores may not be open for you to buy new batteries, but look around. You probably have some. And do that. Charge your cell phones right now. And you can always text 311 at 311-692, which is 311 NYC. For updates about the storm, you could also go to nyc.gov, as I said, or follow NYC Mayor's office, or at NYC Mayor's office, or at Notify NYC on Twitter.
All right, New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg underscoring the importance of the potential dangers of Hurricane Irene as it barrels its way north along the East Coast, making its way to New York. And he says if you live in Zone A and you haven't left already, there are means in which to do so. There are buses available, but he says, quote, even if you have to walk, evacuate now. We'll have much more of our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irene after this.